Bruno Fernandes, Kylian Mbappe and Bukayo Saka are just three of the players who have so far lit up the 2022 World Cup with some outstanding performances, further enhancing their reputations within the game and marking them out as some of the best players on the planet. But what about some of the worst players at this World Cup? The World Cup is the creme de la creme of international football, and this World Cup has proved definitively that even the so-called lesser national teams are still packed full of talent, with no team winning all three group games at the World Cup, and only two teams failing to pick up a single point. Clearly then, this is a very harsh and mean-spirited video, and I would caveat all of my inclusions by saying that, whilst I think they are the worst players in their respective squads, they are all absolutely brilliant footballers. Well, other than one of them, who is actually rubbish and should be nowhere near a FIFA World Cup. To be clear then, I am picking the worst player from every 26-man World Cup squad, or 25-man squad in some instances, based upon their current ability, and not which of their players I just think has performed the worst at this World Cup. Hopefully that is all straightforward enough, so without further ado, here is, in my eyes, and in my eyes only, the worst player in every 2022 World Cup squad. Argentina, Franco Armani. Named after the luxury Italian fashion brand, probably, you can get your own worst player in the Argentina squad name by simply combining the last name of a 20th century dictator with the first name of a high-end fashion house. So, not just Franco Armani, you could also end up with Benito Versace, Zidane Chanel, or Mugabe Balenciaga. Honestly, it is hours of endless fun for all the family over the festive period. Where was I? Oh yeah, Franco Armani is the only River Plate player, and indeed the only domestic-based player, in Argentina's 2022 World Cup squad. And despite having been given the number 1 shirt, he plays second fiddle to Emiliano Martinez. And I do also think that he is a worse keeper than Villarreal's Jeronimo Rulli, despite the fact that he is number 2. A late bloomer, Armani didn't start playing regular top-flight football up until the age of 28 in Colombia, before River Plate signed him for $3 million in January 2018 at the age of 32. Armani also won his first caps for Argentina in 2018, starting at the 2018 World Cup. At age 36, he has since won 18 caps in total. Make no mistake, he is a decent keeper, but nothing more as far as I can tell, so he features as La Albiceleste's inclusion, ahead of Bayer Leverkusen midfielder Ezequiel Palacios. Also, Hitler Hugo Boss, that's another good one. Actually, given Hugo Boss was literally a Nazi party member from 1931 to 1945, and manufactured the Wehrmacht and SS uniforms, that one is probably a little bit too close to the bone. Right, moving on, and I promise to stay firmly on topic from this point on. Australia, Marco Tilio. The biggest surprise package of this World Cup. I expected nothing from Australia, yet they offered so much, performing well beyond the modest means within their squad. There are several mediocre players in the current Socceroos setup, and I say that not as an insult, but to actually drum home just how much they overachieved. Danny Vukovic and Cameron Devlin of the Central Coast Mariners and Hearts respectively could easily have been Australia's inclusion, but I've gone with young Marco Tilio, who only made the Socceroos World Cup squad as a last-minute replacement for the injured Martin Boyle. Tilio is only 21 years old and has been capped 5 times by Australia to date, so it is not all that surprising that he didn't get on the pitch at the World Cup. Gifted, creative, and capable of playing out wide or as a number 10, Tilio has impressed for Melbourne City and has bags of potential, but right now, most of it is just that, potential, hence why he features. Belgium, Zeno de Bast. Another very young player who is unfortunate to feature. It is slightly ironic that one of Belgium's biggest problems at this World Cup, where, totally opposite to Australia, they were perhaps the biggest disappointments, was the ageing of some of their star players, yet I've picked a promising 19-year-old as the worst player in their squad. It is cruel, but I did say that I was picking who I felt was the worst player purely in the here and now. Zeno de Bast may well be the future for Belgium, touted by some as the next Vincent Kompany and already being linked with a handful of massive clubs, but I think that he would probably be better served getting regular game time for the next couple of years at Kompany's old club Anderlecht. He is a really technically gifted ball-playing centre-back who can pick a pass, but he is still raw. And whilst I would not be at all surprised to see him start in the US, Canada and Mexico in 4 years' time as a star man, I understand why Roberto Martinez wasn't willing to throw him straight into the mix after just 20-odd games for Anderlecht at the World Cup in Qatar. Brazil. Dani Alves. From one extreme to the other, Dani Alves is quite literally old enough to be Zeno de Bast's dad. Obviously a world-class footballer for a very long time, and one of the greatest right-backs of his generation, if not of all time, for several seasons at Barcelona, Alves' link-up play with Lionel Messi was almost era-defining in its beauty, fluidity, genius and skill. He is 39 years old now though, taken to Qatar largely for experience, leadership and because, quite frankly and quite unusually for them, Brazil have a real scarcity of talent at right back. Currently playing for UNAM in Mexico, who are third bottom in Liga MX at this moment in time, Alves struggled as Brazil rested almost their entire team and lost to Cameroon in their final group game, in what one suspects will be his only appearance at this World Cup. They are now out, so it definitely will have been. Honourable mentions go to Alex Tellers and Fred, I suppose, but at his age, I think that Dani Alves is the right choice. Cameroon. Simon Njapata Tembu. Speaking of Cameroon, I could have picked young Rennes defender Christopher Wu for the West Africans, whose name is rather easier to pronounce than the player that I actually picked, but hey, who wants an easy life? Simon Njapata Tembu, and yes, it is the Simon that I'm struggling with there, plays as a goalkeeper for Marseille, except he hasn't actually played as a goalkeeper for Marseille yet. Age 19, Njapata Tembu moved to France from Cameroon at a young age, and he has played 24 times to date for Marseille's B team. Uncapped by Cameroon as of yet, given Andre Onana flew home from Qatar, if anything had have happened to Cameroon number 2, Divis Apase, Njapata Tembu would have earned the rare distinction of making his World Cup debut before his first team club debut. Third choice at Marseille right now, despite wearing the club's number 1 shirt, Njapata Tembu has plenty of potential, but he simply had to feature at this stage of his career. Canada. Liam Fraser. Canada didn't win a single point at the 2022 World Cup, the only team other than Qatar not to do so, but I still thought that they gave a pretty decent account of themselves. They were unfortunate against Morocco and Croatia, and they really ought to have won against Belgium. Nonetheless, their squad, whilst it boasts several good players and one outstanding one, is extremely thin and lacking in depth. Former CF Montreal goalkeeper James Pantemes, who is currently a free agent, and St Johnstone midfielder David Wotherspoon are evidence of that fact, but I think that Liam Fraser has to be the unfortunate recipient of my wooden spoon. The 24-year-old midfielder, capped 15 times, currently plays for Deinz in the second tier of Belgian football. When you put it like that, the fact that Canada outplayed Belgium for much of that match is testament to their incredible progress over the last couple of years. Costa Rica. Alvaro Zamora. Costa Rica bounced back from that horrible 7-0 defeat to Spain in their opening game of this World Cup, to beat Japan and score 2 goals against Germany, despite having one of the weakest squads at the tournament. The likes of Daniel Chasson, who recently signed for Colorado Rapids 2, who compete in the third-tier MLS Pro League, and Patrick Sequeira, who plays lower league football in Spain, could easily have featured. But I'm afraid I've got to give it to young Alvaro Zamora. The 20-year-old winger has played just 19 games to date for Deportivo Saprissa in Costa Rica, yet he won 2 caps for Costa Rica just before the World Cup, and he managed to squeak into their squad, which emphasises perhaps that Zamora has a really bright future, one would hope, but also Costa Rica's startling lack of depth. since I'm not sure that there is any other World Cup squad, other than perhaps Qatar's, that he would have made at this tournament. Croatia. Borna Barisic. Punching above their weight as per usual, Croatia, a country of fewer than 4 million people, have reached the semi-final of the 2022 World Cup, having been finalists in 2018. That is a quite extraordinary achievement by an extraordinary group of players, the weakest of whom, if pushed, I would argue is probably Borna Barisic. Signed by Rangers in 2018, having only ever played domestically in Croatia up to that point, Barisic has won 29 caps at the age of 30, and he started in Croatia's knockout wins against both Japan and Brazil, making him a rare inclusion in this list as someone who has actually started at this World Cup. That is largely because, whilst Croatia do have a very good left-back, in the form of young Josko Gvardiol, he is just as capable of playing at centre-back, which is where he plays for them, leaving Stuttgart's Borna Sousa as Barisic's only competition. A brilliant set-piece taker and crosser of a ball, I think some of Barisic's other attributes are perhaps just a little bit more lacking, and I do think that he is the weak link in this Croatia team, hence why he features. Denmark. Jens Stryger Larsen. Denmark had a turgid World Cup campaign, off the back of a brilliant Euros, and having been touted by many as potential dark horses, but Jens Stryger Larsen certainly cannot be held responsible for that, given that he didn't play a single minute of football in any of their games. The reason Larsen didn't play is because he's not very good. That's harsh, and also not true, I apologise, but the 31-year-old right-back, formerly of Udinese and Austria Vienna, who recently signed for Trabzonspor, is the weakest individual in this Denmark squad in my eyes. Capped 49 times by Denmark, Larsen has had a rough time with injuries over the years, and the Turkish Super League seems about right in terms of his level these days. Ecuador. Kevin Rodriguez. This is more than a little cruel, since Kevin Rodriguez is another inclusion who is still only 22 years old, but that doesn't change the fact that he still isn't very good by the standards of a FIFA World Cup. Ecuador had a really good World Cup qualifying campaign, but ultimately went out in the group stage in Qatar, and I think the lack of depth in their squad really hurt them. I don't think Kevin Rodriguez touched the ball at this World Cup, replacing the injured Enner Valencia during injury time against the Netherlands, but he will fly home to Ecuador to join a new club, having just agreed to join Independiente de Laval in the top flight of Ecuadorian football from second tier in Bobara. England. Connor Cody. Maybe it is my English bias kicking in, but I don't think there are any standouts as the weakest player in this England squad, only several decent but not outstanding ones. Nonetheless, Connor Cody ultimately gets my vote as a likeable and solid but somewhat limited centre-back who previously played in central midfield, and is unlikely to add many more appearances to his 10 England caps to date, soon to turn 30 years old. He seems like a great bloke, but I suspect he would actually agree with this inclusion and take it in the spirit with which it is intended. France. Steve Mandanda. England's quarter-final opponents, France, have the best depth of any national team on the planet, and their weakest outfield player would probably be the best weakest outfield player in any World Cup squad, if that makes sense. But I do think that they have a weaker goalkeeper than any England player within their ranks. Steve Mandanda is a Marseille legend who recently signed for Rennes, and some of you may recall that he had a single disappointing season at Crystal Palace a few years ago. It is not because of that Mandanda features, but rather the fact that he is 37 years old now, his best days are firmly behind him, and I think that he is the worst player in the France squad by some margin. Germany. Thilo Kehrer. I recently saw it said that Germany had so much respect for Philipp Lahm that, after he retired from international football, they didn't just retire his shirt number, as some teams do, but actually the position of right back. That isn't strictly true since Joshua Kimmich was an outstanding right back before being moved into midfield, but since Kimmich's transition, they are sorely lacking in the right back position. Either Thilo Kehrer or left-back Christian Gunter could have taken Germany's wooden spoon for me, given Nicholas Füllkrug's remarkable form which forced me to reconsider his talents and exempt him, but I think Kehrer is the right choice. Shaky at times since signing for West Ham, particularly on his debut if I recall rightly, there are no bad players in the Germany squad, despite their poor tournament, but I feel as though Kehrer is probably just about the worst. Ghana. Ibrahim Danlad. It is just a fact that Africa has historically not produced many quality goalkeepers, for a whole variety of reasons that we haven't got the time to get into, but it is no surprise that the weakest player from a couple of African teams at this World Cup just happen to be goalkeepers. Ibrahim Danlad is a 20-year-old shot stopper who plays his club football for Asante Kotoko in Ghana, and he won the Goalkeeper of the Year award at the Ghana Football Awards in 2021. Capped 4 times by Ghana to date, there is every chance that Danlad will one day sign for a European club and become Ghana's number 1, but right now he is only in the Ghana squad because they are sorely lacking in terms of having one quality goalkeeper, let alone 3. Iran. Abolfazli Jalali. Iran are a team who have a couple of star players in Sardar Azmoun and most notably Mehdi Taremi, a handful of decent ones, and then a handful more functional ones who can do a job in the right system. The rest, as this World Cup illustrated, are thoroughly mediocre. Left-back Abolfazli Jalali illustrates Iran's lack of depth, capped 4 times at the age of 24, and he probably wouldn't look out of place playing in League One. There are lots of Iran players in a similar boat, in all truth, but I had to pick one out for this video, and Jalali is the unfortunate one who gets that distinction. Japan. Daniel Schmidt. A breath of fresh air at this World Cup, Japan were fantastic, beating Germany and Spain in the group stage, and unfortunate to go out against Croatia on penalties in the round of 16. I might have gone with Shogo Taniguchi pre-tournament, who, admittedly, as someone who doesn't watch a great deal of J-League football, I don't know all that much about, but I actually thought that he looked pretty solid in that Croatia game. Consequently, I have gone with Daniel Schmidt, the least Japanese-sounding player in the Japan squad, as a result of the fact that he was born in the United States to an American father and a Japanese mother. One of 5 Japanese players currently contracted to Japanese-owned Sint-Truiden in Belgium, Schmidt is a giant of a man and a steady keeper, but far from outstanding. A bit flappy at times, Schmidt's distribution also leaves quite a lot to be desired, and capped 11 times at the age of 30, he's my choice for the Samurai Blue. Mexico. Johan Vazquez. Currently on loan at newly promoted Cremonese in Serie A, from divisional rivals Genoa, Johan Vazquez spent last season on loan at his current parent club from UNAM. Before that he was on loan at UNAM from Monterrey, and, well, look, just have a look at that. What I'm saying here is that Johan Vazquez seems to have a pretty strict try before you buy policy. The 24-year-old centre-back, who has been capped 7 times by Mexico to date, was one of a number of Mexicans who didn't get on the pitch at the 2022 World Cup. Physically and technically equipped to become a regular starter for Mexico and a really good centre-back, Vazquez is still raw, hence why he features, and prone to the odd mistake. But I still think that he will be a regular for them in a couple of years' time, and I could just as easily have gone with Uriel Antuna. Morocco. Yahya Atiet Allah. Morocco have been sublime at this World Cup, and when you actually look at their squad, or certainly their starting 11 and the balance within it, I don't think that should come as much surprise as it possibly has done. Further down the Morocco squad, there are some slightly more obscure names, including Yahya Atiat Allah, who has won just his second cap for Morocco at the age of 27 at this World Cup, when he came on as an 82nd minute substitute against Spain in the round of 16. A quick and adventurous fullback who plays his club football in Morocco, Allah plays second fiddle to Nuswa Mazraoui at left-back in this Morocco squad, who himself plays predominantly as a right-back for Bayern Munich. The Netherlands. Vincent Janssen. The Netherlands squad is one of several at this World Cup, capable of putting out a formidable starting 11, but significantly lacking in depth. Between them, all three Dutch goalkeepers had won just 12 caps coming into this World Cup, and the Dutch don't have another forward who has scored 10 plus international goals other than Memphis Depay. That includes Tottenham flop Vincent Janssen, now of Royal Antwerp, who has scored 7 goals from 22 caps to date, and, on the balance of things, I think that he is probably the weakest player in Louis van Gaal's squad. Poland. Michael Skorash. Similar to the Netherlands, just with a much weaker starting 11, past about number 16 or 17 in the Poland squad, then they are struggling. This is illustrated by 34-year-old Kamil Grosicki, who I have many fond memories of as a Hull City fan, but who now plays back home in Poland, making their squad. But I still don't think that he is the weakest player in there. Young Michael Skorash has only ever won a couple of caps for Poland, both of them coming just shortly before the World Cup, after he enjoyed a bright end to last season playing for Lech Poznan. A bright, hard-working right winger, or right wing-back, Skorash has great attitude, application and adventure, but he is yet to show much in the way of end product, both in terms of his crosses into the box and his efforts on goal. He sneaks in narrowly ahead of 35-year-old Legia Warsaw centre-back Artur Jędryk, despite having a lot more potential than the veteran. Portugal. Antonio Silva. I actually found Portugal the most difficult squad to pick out a notable weak link from, and for a country of just 10 million people, their strength in depth is nothing short of remarkable. I have gone with Antonio Silva, who is a magnificent young centre-back and has the potential to be one of the best defenders in the world, because he hasn't yet realised that potential and is still a long way off becoming one of the best defenders in the world just yet. Aged only 19, Silva has made just 10 league appearances for Benfica to date, and 18 in all competitions, so it is a mark of the high regard in which he is held that he made Portugal's squad at all. So gifted for a centre-back, Silva's touch, technique and passing are all outstanding, so whilst he might be Portugal's weakest player right now, expect him to partner Ruben Dias for most of the next decade and leave Benfica for an enormous fee at some stage. Qatar. Yusuf Hassan. Despite being Asian champions and having invested an absolute fortune in football over the last 20 years building up to this point, Qatar were very underwhelming at their own World Cup, as one of only 2 teams not to win a single point, and much less impressive than the other team, Canada, in my eyes at least. One of Qatar's biggest problems was their lack of goalkeepers. Al Saad's Saad El Sheib started the tournament in goal for Qatar against Ecuador, but he looked as though it might have been his first time playing football, so he was replaced by Meshal Barsham, who also plays for Al Saad, for their games against Senegal and the Netherlands, who was still dreadful, but crucially, not quite as dreadful. Yusuf Hassan, Qatar's only goalkeeper who doesn't play for Al Saad, didn't even play a single minute at the World Cup, which presumably means that he is even worse than Al Sheib and Barsham. I don't think that I've ever seen him play, but on those grounds alone, he has to be their worst player. Saudi Arabia. Riyad Sharahili. After stunning Argentina in their opening game, Saudi Arabia ultimately went out in the group stage of another World Cup without disgracing themselves, it must be said. But there are still some distinctly average or worse players within their World Cup squad. Riyad Sharahili is one of them, I would argue, capped only 6 times at the age of 29, the first of which only arrived in 2022. A late bloomer then, Sharahili is essentially a utility man, capable of playing in holding, central or on the left side of midfield, and from a crowded field, he is my pick. Senegal. Mustafa Naim. It is unfortunate for Senegal, the reigning African champions, who are a very good team, that they were without their talisman Sadio Mane and came up against a really strong England team in the round of 16, as with their main man and up against slightly less formidable opposition, I think that they could have progressed. That is, admittedly quite a lot of ifs and buts, but what I'm trying to say is that they have lots of decent players. Mustafa Naim is one of the weaker names in the Senegal squad, if you see what I did there, currently playing his club football for Paphos in the Cypriot First Division. A leggy and athletic midfielder who played in France's second tier for Paris FC up until the summer, Naim is by no means a bad player, but he is the worst in the Senegal squad, possibly along with Formos Mendy at this moment in time. Serbia. Filip Mrdenovic. A Serbian who is currently playing his football in Poland for Legia Warsaw, Filip Mrdenovic has won 21 caps for Serbia at the age of 31, and after starting in Serbia's opening game against Brazil, he didn't feature against either Cameroon or Switzerland, and I wouldn't be all that surprised if he never added to those 21 caps. A devilish and at times quite dirty left back, renowned for his speed and aggression, whilst the aggression still remains, Mrdenovic's speed might just be beginning to desert him. Capable of putting a wicked delivery into the box that may sustain Mrdenovic for another couple of seasons in Poland's top flight, but I would be surprised if it kept him in international contention. South Korea. Cho Yoo-min. South Korea's run to the knockout stage of the World Cup was brought to rather an abrupt end by Brazil, though Cho Yoo-min played no part in that 4-1 drubbing. The 26-year-old only won his first caps for South Korea earlier this year, after dropping down into the second tier of South Korean football, where he won promotion, with Daejeon Hana Citizen. Included in the South Korea squad, one suspects, primarily due to his versatility, Yoo-min isn't a brilliant footballer, and he is possibly better known in South Korea for being the fiancé of K-pop star Park So-young. Spain. Eric Garcia. Too many quality managers and intelligent football people rate Eric Garcia for him not to be a quality player, and I'm convinced therefore that I am deeply wrong about him, and that there is obviously something that I'm missing. Until I witness that thing with my own two eyes though, I am going to have to be honest and say that I think he's the worst player in the Spain squad. A centre-back who isn't the strongest or most commanding, and is prone to the odd mistake, Garcia's defensive positioning and technique might be alright, but, as I said, a Barcelona and Spain centre-back, I just haven't seen it yet. Switzerland. Fabian Frey. A bit of a legend of Swiss football due to his many years at Basel, and more than a decade in the national team. I don't know if this will be blasphemous in Switzerland, but I think that he is the worst player in the Switzerland squad. The 23 caps that Frey has won since 2011 is also indicative of the fact that, whilst he has always been there, he hasn't actually played all that many games. And his introduction, after 71 minutes against Cameroon, was actually his World Cup debut. Like a few players in this Swiss squad, Frey's best days are behind him, and whilst he is a model pro who has had a great career, that's not enough for me to spare him. Tunisia. Nada Gandri. The Tunisia squad is not a strong squad. I said that before the World Cup, and they did nothing to prove me wrong. Actually, that is a lie. They did beat France, but by that point they were already out, and France had rested all their players, and basically, I still don't think they're very good. It was a toss-up between several players, but if I had to pick just one, which, I do and have, it is Nada Gandri. The 27-year-old French-born Tunisian international had several cracks at making it in Europe, in France, Belgium and Bulgaria, but has ultimately settled in Tunisia, playing for Club Africain. I think that is because he is a defensive midfielder with very few outstanding attributes other than his size and strength, which is why I would never say any of this to his face, but also hence why he features. The United States. Shaq Moore. One of the easier decisions in this list, I haven't seen all that much of Shaq Moore, which, I should reiterate, is the case with several of these players, and I could, and indeed, I hope that I am wrong about many of them, but from what I have seen of him, well, he isn't very good, at least not by international standards, or the level that the United States seeks to be at. Signed by Nashville SC from Tenerife for a reported $2 million last summer, Moore is an industrious right-back whose attitude and application can never be questioned. His ability, on the other hand, probably can, and the fact that he played more football at this World Cup than Gio Reyna, admittedly, in very different positions, seems to me to be a little insane. As I saw one person joke on Twitter, USMNT fans could be forgiven for having seen enough of Shaq Moore at this stage and for wanting a bit of Shaq less from now on. Uruguay. Jose Luis Rodriguez. Not to be confused, and I repeat, not to be confused, with the 79-year-old Venezuelan singer and actor Jose Luis Rodriguez, who I'm sure he is much better at football than. The Jose Luis Rodriguez in the Uruguay squad is just 25 years old and, surprisingly, he makes his living playing football for Nacional. Probably still not quite the finished product, as yet uncapped by Uruguay, despite making their World Cup squad. Rodriguez was in there to make up the numbers, something which is always likely to be necessary for a country of just 3.5 million people with a national team that routinely punches vastly above its weight. Wales. Johnny Williams. Our final inclusion. I think several players in the Wales squad reiterate just how well Wales did to overcome Ukraine and reach this World Cup, and to earn a draw against the United States. Johnny Williams, who is my choice, whilst undeniably gifted, now plays his club football for Swindon Town in the 4th tier of English football, and he has done actually for the last 18 months. I could just as easily have plumped for Cardiff's Mark Harris, or MK Dons' Matthew Smith, who I saw a little bit of during his time on loan at my club Hull City, but following his myriad of injury problems, and given the level that he now plays at, I think that Williams is probably the right choice. That is it for today's video, and I must admit, I found it fairly brutal. I don't really like making negative videos, unless they are about people who thoroughly deserve to be slandered, but hopefully it is understood that these are just the worst players out of a group of elite-level footballers, with the exception of the Qatar goalkeepers, who did genuinely appear to be useless at the World Cup. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure, of course, it goes without saying, that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.